Breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. The final college football playoff rankings are out, and after their blowout win over number 1 Georgia in the SEC title game, Alabama becomes the number 1 team in the number 1 position. Michigan holds steady at number 2, Georgia drops to number 3, and Cincinnati comes in at 4, making history as the first Group of 5 team to get into the playoff. Their reward is facing Alabama in the college football playoff semifinal. That game will be the Cotton Bowl in Arlington, Texas. Georgia and Michigan will play in the Orange Bowl. That game will take place in Miami, both games being played on December 31st. And here to give us some quick reaction to the final rankings, former Florida State quarterback Danny Kannell is here with me in the studio. We have Chip Patterson also on the line. Danny, I'll start with you. How do you feel about the ordering of the final playoff ranking?
I know we're supposed to build up drama, and they did on a release show, but this is exactly what I thought the committee would do. I don't think there's really that much argument or anything to have our arms, up in the air over this one. I think it was pretty clear cut. You saw Bama with that win yesterday, thoroughly, handling a Georgia team, which had been ranked most of the season, the invincibility there. We saw Michigan with what they did to Iowa. I thought they'd come in right where they did. And then we all kind of knew the Cincinnati, as much as we're talking about, what a monumental moment is, there was no chance they were going to be higher than 4. So, and then you slot in the extra team right there. It makes sense exactly where these teams came in. This is exactly where I thought they would.
So in the CFP and non-conspiracy theory den, of course, we're going to be looking at Alabama and Georgia, whether or not there would be a position where Alabama and Georgia would be matched up at the 2 and 3 spot. But I go back to remembering the way that this committee has treated Alabama all throughout the season. Even with that loss to Texas A&M, even with some unimpressive performances, like the AP poll, for example, would knock Alabama for not being impressive against the likes of an LSU or for having a close call with Arkansas. But that was not really the case with the selection committee. So a selection committee that was always favorable, I didn't say biased, I said favorable in its treatment of Alabama, is going to look at that win against Georgia, the team that it had number 1 from the jump, and it's going to give it the strongest amount of boost. So I see it less as avoiding the matchup and more with the committee looking at an Alabama team that it has been higher on than a lot of college football for the entire season and giving that number 1 spot to the Crimson Tide.
Chip, you say potato, I say potato. As far as the bias or whether they like them, there clearly is a bias toward one conference, which has been the dominant conference. The SEC has won all these championships in the last 10 to 15 years. There's a reason why they get it, and it is really tough to forget that history of success they've had, which is absolutely why you see Alabama as the 1 spot right here.
Okay, so let's talk about your social media reaction last night. You were very critical of Georgia and their schedule after that loss in the game last night to Alabama. You even questioned their spot as a playoff team. So give us the reasoning behind that.
You follow me on Twitter, right? I mean, there's a little bit of troll in me.
There's a little bit of troll. I wish
we should pay money for the Cover 3 subscribers. We should charge extra to let them see our text thread because we were having it out on the Cover 3 text chain. I knew Georgia was going to get in, no matter what the outcome was. Everybody did. But again, it goes back to the SEC bias. If they're going to treat Georgia like everybody else, like, say, a Cincinnati or a Notre Dame or a Michigan, let's actually treat them the same and ask the same questions that we would ask of other teams. And if you look at Georgia's resume, there aren't that many wins except for one, really, that jumps out to you. And it was all the way back in week 1, which they won 10-3 and didn't have an offensive touchdown. So I thought it was interesting that we don't even ask the question of Georgia. We just go ahead and give them the spot without asking the questions that we did of everybody else. The problem is this year, it's not a problem, it's just the reality of the situation. There wasn't a great team to say that's the one that should be in over Georgia, which is why they're in the top 4 and why I'm not really upset about it. I just couldn't resist the conversation to get it started.
Well, specifically, I don't think the bias is necessarily towards one conference. I think it's more to the familiar faces. And the college football playoff is like a restaurant or a bar that treats its regulars much differently than it treats someone new that just shows up. I look at these final rankings just outside the top 4, Ohio State at number 6. If the Buckeyes had been able to beat Oregon early in the season, have almost the same results all the way through, wouldn't we be talking about the threat of Ohio State getting in over Cincinnati for maybe that number 4 spot, a 2 SEC, 2 Big Ten college football playoff. So yeah, like an Alabama's treated differently. Georgia's treated differently. Ohio State's treated differently. The familiar faces, the regulars at the restaurant are going to get the better tables. That's just kind of my sense of the college football playoff and how they treat the powers in the sport.
I keep thinking of, you make that reference, I keep thinking of Cheers. Is Bama Cliff or are they Norm when they walk in? Do they go, oh, Bama?
They're right? Sam. They own the bar.
Oh, there we go, yeah. Full credit to Cincinnati. Talking about, new patrons in terms of the college football playoff. Full credit to Cincinnati for getting there. Chip, what does this accomplishment mean for those G5 conferences?
It shows that there's a path, even if it's an extremely unlikely one, because while the selection committee only looks at this season, there is no way that the evaluation of Cincinnati doesn't at least subconsciously take into consideration what they did just a year ago, where they did not lose a single game all season until a field goal loss to Georgia in the Peach Bowl. It's like you look at the whole body of work, 22-1. Many of the same players. Desmond Ridder was still your starting quarterback. Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, and the rest of that secondary, a lot of that still in place. Alec Pierce as well. This is a group that it has taken almost 2 years of building to be able to get to this point. That is not something or a luxury that UCF was afforded when it went undefeated. That is not a luxury that has been afforded to other teams. But because Cincinnati had the remaining group and all the success a year ago and that very, very important game against Notre Dame, the Bearcats have been able to make history here. And I'm just glad that we got over that hump, because now I think we move beyond maybe the group of 5 makes its own playoff, or maybe we've got all this other organization. Though it is hilarious, though, that when we look at the American Athletic Conference game, that was really just a future Big 12 championship game. So maybe the group of 5 still is in a pretty difficult position.
I'm just glad Bud and I have our 100-to-1 bet with Tom Fornelli that he owes us, because he said Cincinnati was never going to get in. That's a side topic, though. But I do think this is just setting up group of 5 teams for more heartbreak. They're going to feel like they have a legitimate chance. And as Chip alluded to, this was an extremely rare situation. And I do think you have to have 2 years, not 1, 2 years, and maybe even 3 years in a row, which Cincinnati did have coming into the season, a season of buildup. And they also, by the way, took Georgia to the line last year, to the wire in their bowl game last year, where Georgia needed a last-second field goal. All of those things align. And then the stars aligned this year with the wildest college football we've seen in probably the last 10 or 20 years. But ultimately, we can act like this is shattering the glass ceiling, and all of a sudden there's going to be group of 5 teams in the discussion every year. This is going to be the anomaly. This is not going to become the norm.
Okay, so if you're picking a national title game today, Danny, who's playing in it?
I'm going to go with Bama versus Michigan. I think Georgia got exposed a little bit yesterday.
Okay, Chip?
Alabama, Georgia.
Rematch.
I know that we don't want it. Yeah, I think we get the rematch. Georgia, I do think Kirby Smart mentioned in the post-game press conference that he thinks that there's a real opportunity for sort of this team to reset and attack the postseason as a 2-game season and be able to go and still accomplish all the goals that the Bulldogs felt like they deserved throughout the entire year. I think that Kirby Smart and this Georgia defense against Michigan's offense is going to be advantage Bulldogs. So I think it's Alabama against Georgia again.
Still Stetson Bennett against that Michigan defense, though.
True.
Danny Kannell, Chip Patterson joining us here on HQ to break down the final CFP rankings as the road to the national championship is now clearly laid out. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It'll be Alabama versus Cincinnati in the Cotton Bowl. That will take place in Arlington, Texas, and Michigan versus Georgia in the Orange Bowl. That will be in Miami. The teams had some input as to which bowl game they played. Alabama probably getting the choice here, probably choosing to play indoors. Danny, someone who also says, if you're Nick Saban, you control the controllables, and certainly playing indoors is something that they would be able to control in terms of the elements.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.